In the city of Lagos, where the lagoon carries secrets heavier than concrete bridges and the air hums with the impatience of millions, there is an old saying whispered by market women when the day grows tired. When sorrow refuses to leave a house, heaven sends it a neighbor. This is the story of three neighbors the city refused to ignore. Suralaya was not the richest part of Lagos, nor the poorest. It was a place of in-betweens, buildings the color of fading hope, balconies that held both drying clothes and unfinished dreams, and corridors narrow enough for lives to brush against each other whether they wished to or not. It was there that Olufemi Adeyemi lived, Femi, as the city knew him, a man whose profession was to sell homes but who had quietly evicted joy from his own. Femi understood property the way priests understand scripture. He could look at cracked walls and see potential. He could walk clients through empty rooms and describe futures that had not yet happened, laughter in corners, children racing down hallways, the smell of stew drifting from unseen kitchens. He was persuasive because he believed in structures. Concrete did not betray. Steel did not wake up one morning and choose another man. His wife had. She had left not with anger but with certainty, following a promise whispered by someone else. Femi learned of her death the way one learns of a distant accident on Third Mainland Bridge, sudden, disorienting, unreal. The hospital called because his name was still written beside hers. She had died giving birth. The man she chose was nowhere to be found. And so, betrayal placed a child in Femi's arms and called it destiny. He named her Fifikem, to be pampered with love. It was the kind of name that sounded like an apology. A wish. But grief is stubborn in Lagos. It hides in traffic. It waits in silence. Every time Femi looked into his daughter's eyes, he saw a question he did not want to answer: why was I not enough? The child's existence felt like evidence. He fed her, paid school fees, hired help when work kept him late. Yet his affection was careful, measured, as though love were a resource that could run dry if poured too generously. Across the corridor, in an apartment that still smelled faintly of shea butter and old hymn books, lived Naya Dankwa. Naya had returned to Lagos not as a conqueror but as a daughter too late. Her mother, Afia, had raised her alone, stitching resilience into every dress she sewed and into every word she spoke. Afia's love had been practical: food on time, school fees paid, prayers said before sunrise. But Naya had mistaken steadiness for permanence. She had fallen in love with ambition wrapped in polished shoes and easy charm, a man who promised escape from the ordinary. She had chased that promise across cities, leaving behind a mother whose cough grew deeper and whose phone calls grew shorter. When death came, it did not wait for reconciliation. By the time Naya returned, condolences had replaced conversation. Regret moved in with her and refused to pay rent. She took over her mother's modest apartment in Suralaya because living would have felt like abandoning her twice. The rooms were heavy with memory, curtains her mother chose, plates she insisted were for special visitors, a Bible whose margins carried small, hopeful notes. Grief made Naya quiet. Lagos, however, does not honor quiet for long. It was a child's laughter that first broke through her mourning. Fifikem had a way of laughing as though the world had never disappointed her. The sound traveled easily through thin walls. One afternoon, when the hired nanny failed to show and Femi was delayed by clients and traffic that refused to move, necessity performed its ancient magic. Naya opened her door to find a small girl with curious eyes and uncombed hair clutching a crayon like a sword. In that moment, something in Naya shifted. She did not see betrayal. She did not see scandal. She saw innocence, unburdened, unknowing. And perhaps she saw a second chance at loving without postponement. Fifikem took to Naya with the fearless loyalty only children possess. She listened to her stories, allowed her to braid her hair, accepted correction without suspicion. In the child's presence, Naya's guilt softened. Loving this little girl felt like practicing for a forgiveness she did not yet know how to give herself. Femi noticed, though he pretended not to. He began returning home to find drawings on the table, stick figures labeled with uneven handwriting. One evening, he found a sentence written with painstaking concentration, "Miss Naya says I am special." The word lingered in his mind long after the house fell silent. Special. He could not remember the last time he had described his daughter that way. Responsibility. Yes. Obligation. Certainly. But special implied delight. It implied choice. The city washed. And so did Mrs. Storyteller-led, the widow from 2 floors down, whose life had already taught her that betrayal often arrives wearing familiarity. Years earlier, she and her husband had taken in a young man with no family, fed him, clothed him, called him son. It was that same young man who orchestrated the robbery that ended her husband's life. If bitterness were a seed, it would have flourished easily in her heart. Instead, she chose faith, not the loud, performative kind, but the persistent type that knocks gently on doors and waits. Mrs. Storyteller-led understood patterns. She saw the way Femi carried his daughter as though she might dissolve. She saw the way Naya lingered in corridors after returning the child, as though reluctant to retreat into her own solitude. She did not interfere. Folklore teaches that healing, like palm wine, cannot be forced, it must ferment. The turning point did not arrive with thunder. It came during a power outage, when the city's noise dimmed and conversation became unavoidable. The air was thick with heat, windows open to invite whatever breeze might wander through. In the half-dark, truths felt less exposed. Naya spoke first, her voice stripped of pride. She confessed the arrogance of assuming time would wait for her, the cruelty of prioritizing romance over her mother's weakening body. The words trembled but did not break. Femi listened longer than he intended. Something in her remorse disarmed him. When he finally spoke, it was without the polish he used on clients. The confession hung between them, raw and unadorned. In that shared vulnerability, comparison dissolved. Grief recognized grief. Regret recognized regret. Neither tried to outdo the other's pain. Lagos traffic might compete, but wounded hearts do not. Change, when it came, was incremental. Femi began kneeling to speak to his daughter at eye level. He lingered when she hugged him. He listened when she described her day, even when the stories were trivial. Each act felt unfamiliar, like learning a language he should have known from birth. Naya, too, transformed. She no longer treated kindness as penance but as presence. She stopped loving from guilt and began loving from choice. With each shared meal, each laugh stolen from a stubborn day, she felt her mother's memory shift from accusation to blessing. One evening, returning earlier than expected, Femi paused at his doorway. On the couch lay a quiet tableau, Naya asleep, exhaustion softening her features, and 5 cam curled against her chest, small hand resting securely over her heart. The room glowed in the amber light of a single lamp. There was no drama, no declaration, only peace. It was the kind of peace Lagos rarely advertises but occasionally grants. Standing there, Femi realized something unsettling and beautiful. The child he had struggled to embrace had become the bridge he did not know he needed. Through her laughter, through her uncomplicated trust, she had dismantled the walls he built to protect himself. She had turned betrayal into connection, absence into possibility. Outside, the city roared as it always did, buses arguing with potholes, vendors bargaining with urgency, life refusing to slow. But inside that modest Surale apartment, something ancient and tender unfolded, 3 wounded souls discovering that pain, when shared honestly, can lose its sharpest edges. And so the saying proved itself true. In Lagos, sorrow may arrive uninvited. It may sit heavily in your living room and refuse to leave. But if you remain long enough, if you allow your doors to open even slightly, the city will send you neighbors. Not perfect ones. Not unscarred ones. But neighbors whose brokenness fits against yours like missing pieces of a forgotten design. In the end, it was not grand gestures that redeemed them. It was proximity. It was humility. It was the steady courage to love again without guarantees. And in a city built on survival, that kind of love is the closest thing to folklore becoming flesh.